Imran Khan, Swan Energy.
Brandon Davis, Swan Energy.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining the program here this week. A little mining money, finding out some investments, how to, actually, more how to than where to, because it's more about how to than it is. I know there's where to involved, but we can get to that in just a second. So anyway, before we get existential, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great. It's a little cloudy day today in Houston, but weather's great. Enjoying the fall winter season over here, which involves wearing short t-shirts and just hanging out, having fun.
The weather's only perfect in Houston 10 months a year, so
one of the perks.
It's probably 8, but still, there are 4 months that can be extremely hot and humid. But the rest of the year is amazing here. So
we have the flip side of that. We have jokes that we have road construction season and winter, and those are our 2 seasons up here. And then the other jokes, of course, are that it's so cold that you can't go outside, which is a reality sometimes. And we've got a little bit of snow on the ground here right now before Thanksgiving, as we're talking about. But speaking of which, we're a few weeks after the election now. It's a week and a half, whatever it is. And, there's still no official declaration of a winner, but a lot of people are certainly going the Joe Biden route. And I'm noticing there's a lot of articles out there, and one in particular, and I was very curious to get your guys' reaction on, and it has to do with, what some of the leaders, 5 U.S. energy leaders, offer takes on potential impacts of a Biden win. And gentleman who's been on this program before, Lee Tillman, he's the Marathon Chief Executive Officer. Lee Tillman, I found it interesting because what he said is what we've been talking about for 3-4 weeks now, in fact, leading up to it, which is we are realistic that with a Biden win, doing business on BLM land will become more difficult. And that's been basically one of our big chunks of conversation. So I just wanted to get your guys' reaction to what, Lee Tillman is talking about and how it kind of correlates with what you guys were also referring to over the last few weeks, even before the election started.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's interesting to see the views of different folks chiming in. And, the BLM land is a big item for the different companies, more from a new development standpoint of assets and being able to utilize the areas for new oil and new gas developments. I think having those spaces available really do make a big difference, and making those available from the government standpoint. But keep in mind, there's a lot of private land out there also that we've got in the U.S. that's probably different than a lot of other countries out there, which we are very fortunate to have, that people can still be able to go out and drill on.
I think it's interesting that we actually may know what we're talking about because we're not the only ones saying what we're saying. It seems to be across the board, and overall, the environment will get a little harder. But at the end of the day, I think the impact will be insignificant in general, overall, in my opinion.
Another one I wanted to mention was Energy Transfer. They talked about the pipeline companies and how some regulation might be of concern. They still, pretty positive that, the pipelines are going to be moving forward because India, China, they're getting a middle class and they're going to start wanting, certain products and a certain lifestyle. And so whether it's being pipelined and then shipped over, or whether it's being produced here in the U.S., there at least seems to be some optimism when it comes to whether it be natural gas or crude oil moving through the pipelines once some of this dust settles. What are your guys' thoughts when it comes to the next 4 years or whatever, when it comes to regulations and pipelines and either exporting it or maybe keeping it here?
I believe that there will, if there is impediment, it'll be minimal. I don't think it'll make a big difference. I'm much more concerned of our country heading towards socialism than I am being able to get oil and gas out of the country, personally, because I believe that it's not going to change. The demand's not going to go away. So those things that are required to move the product are going to have to be there. Yeah, maybe it's harder to get permits, but at the end of the day, I only know of one pipeline that got stopped ever that needed to be put in. So
it's good to be able to understand, like this is a 4-year window in this situation that we're talking about. The development and creation of these pipelines and methods of transfer, take ages to build and to be able to get approved and move forward. So from that standpoint, a typical project that an oil and gas company puts together, that are in the billions, it might take them 10 years to be able to put it all together and from start to finish. And I think that from that standpoint, one administration is not going to change things that drastically. At the end of the day, it's just more of how you can work together and make things happen. And I think that's going to be a key thing that we'll be working towards, I'm sure, in the next 4 years, depending on how it moves forward from a presidency and also from the other branches.
Brandon, you brought up a very good point that we've been kind of following for the last 3 years, specifically here on the Crude Life, which is this shift away from capitalism. And socialism is a great way to kind of throw that out there, whether it's paying people to stay at home and work, or there's a new trend now that Texas tried to do where they tried to control the production, and I think that got voted down. And then in North Dakota, they shifted some CARES Act money to oil companies, and I see they did the same thing in Wyoming now. And I understand the rationale behind it, but it's a trend. And it seems that there's more and more of this trend to convert the oil and gas industry to more of a socialistic industry. And I'll be honest, the whole reason I'm in the oil and gas business because I think it's the last bastion for capitalism. I take a look at every other industry. It's so controlled from ag to tech to UAVs to everything else that anytime you can get a roughneck to figure out how to make a vibrating tube go twice as fast, and he's running a company with 10 employees within a year, that baby, that's America. That's what it's all about. And I'm seeing that go more and more away. And you brought that up about your concern shifting away from, or shifting towards socialism, which I assume is away from capitalism. Can I talk to you more about that, or have you fleshed that out a little more, just in the way that I did with a couple examples?
I wasn't really speaking of it in a sense that was towards oil and gas. As far as I'm talking about in general overall, and I agree with you that the oil and gas business is the last bastion. There's nothing else like it in this country right now, or in the world. So as far as innovation and just freedom, and I hope that doesn't change. And I can't think of anything specifically, Jason, to be honest with you. I haven't thought that deep into it. So sorry, but
no, that's okay. Yeah. But I mean, I've heard some frustrations over the paying people to stay home and the lack of motivation. And it's generally the frustration is centered in that sort of accountability, if you will, that a lot of entrepreneurship and capitalism brings to the table. And so I get those examples that you've had through the time, but I guess I brought it up just more for that last bastion of capitalism, and that's really how I look at the oil and gas industry. And Imran, I don't know, you own restaurants, and you've got your fingers in a few other pies too. Talk to me about your thoughts on that. Is the oil and gas industry the last bastion for capitalism?
I think the oil and gas industry is the new frontier. And what I mean by that is, especially these smaller independent oil and gas producers that are out there, it's not an easy business to be in, right? Like, you might have folks that are in oil and gas or other industries, and they may or may not understand what's actually, happening as time moves forward. And, if there is a steer away from oil and gas, or a steer to stay home, right? I think these types of things, a lot of folks don't really understand the full impacts of, just because they're not privy to running their own business. It's challenging, right? When you think of an independent oil and gas producer, and the different work that we do, sure, we're probably not the innovators. We're probably, in a sense, following some of what the bigger companies out there are doing, the BPs, the Shells, the Chevrons of the world. They've got technology out there going into the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, or Nigeria, or wherever off of Australia, that is probably more challenging than to be able to send a man onto the moon. But with that said, I think coming back to the small business part of it, yeah, it's difficult, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, to be battling legislations or regulations and things of that nature. But it's nothing that it's nothing out of the ordinary that a person who's running a small business doesn't deal with on a regular basis, right? You always have different competing priorities, and you always have different new challenges that pop up, and you learn how to adapt around it. And I think we obviously want to be able to do whatever we can to be able to make that as simple as possible. And I think that's really our main approach. But, depending on what type of regulations we'll see and how things are going to move forward, maybe you'll see that the larger oil and gas companies that are out there produce less, but then, you'll have these independents that are smaller guys that are going to produce more. At the end of the day, whatever energy outlook you look at, there's always a big push for more energy needed, right? And where does that really stem from? It stems from folks actually using that energy, right? So, unless you want to, I guess, sit at home and do nothing, that some want you to do. I think that's really what will kill that industry more than anything else. But changing the way that you do things is probably more the key thing there, right? If you need to be able to use less energy, you need to change the way that you do your work, the way that you do everyday shopping, or the way that you turn on your air conditioner down to 68 degrees rather than 75. All these types of things make a big difference, and people have to make that decision to make that change.
I love it. The new frontier. In fact, that's what we should probably focus on, is this new frontier that's going to happen. And I mentioned China, India, they got that emerging middle class that's happening. Here in America, we've got this whole rebuild thing that's happening, whether it's new appliances or it's new energy efficient windows. There is a rebuilding that is going on, whether it's through tax credits or regulations, whatever the case might be. My point is that I've seen articles percolating more and more about the resurgence happening in the manufacturing industry. And anytime that happens, it can't be powered without the natural resources to make it go around. And a lot of, things that are happening is more of, NIMBY, not in my backyard when it comes to drilling, or offshore, but it's still happening. And these countries that have got major populations that have been without a middle class for so long, that's happening regardless. So from the safe standpoint, I'm taking a look back at what we're here to talk about, which is investing in the oil and gas industry and fossil fuels and et cetera. Swan Energy, swanenergy.com, inc.com/invest for those who want to check out a video and a little more specific. But very long way to talk a little bit about where we're going with the new frontier, and whether it's rebuilding America with energy efficiency, whether it's powering America to keep it great, whether it's these emerging middle classes over in China and India. I do see fossil fuels, natural resources as being a very safe investment over the next 5, 10, 20 years. Talk to me about how you guys are looking at the new frontier from that aspect, from an investment aspect, if you wouldn't mind.
Energy efficiencies are constant and have been for a long, long time, and that should never stop. I mean, always should get better.
No one is against that.
No, I always should get better. Cleaner energy sources, absolutely. I mean, I am not against any of that. I'm 100% for it, and I'm actually considering it. But at the end of the day, it all has to work together to get us all, to keep us moving, to keep us living, to keep us building, to keep us growing. All of whatever the sources of energy are have to be able to collaborate, whether they get along. I'm air quoting that or not. It's like at the end of the day, energy is energy, and the cheaper, easier way to get it is always better. Burning less, being more efficient is always better, because even with the solar and wind that they're working on, and all the other potential renewable sources of energy, we only have a finite amount, and how much is the question, of oil and gas in the ground. It's a depleting resource. So we're idiots if we aren't getting more efficient as we go, whether that's making plastic or keeping your house warm. Either way, it's got to get more efficient, because at some point there's going to be less. And down the road, at some point, way down the road, there's going to be maybe none. And so we're going to have to find replacements for all these things. I mean, that's just reality. So I'm all about efficiency, and I think that as far as the industry goes, that's where we always are moving. We're trying to get more efficient, get our wells drilled cheaper, get our wells fracked cheaper, use less water than we have to, but use as much as we need. So there's this fine line, and that's the oil and gas business constantly pushes those limits.
Yeah, cost savings are always important, right, around that stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, the more you want to be able to, the more you can save, the more you can put into your pocket. So that's never really an issue. And to Brandon's point, who doesn't want energy efficiency? I think that's really a big key. But I think it's important to be able to understand first world problems, as people talk about, versus third world situations, right? I mean, in the third world, there's lots of paradigm shifts that are happening, right? There's a building of the middle class. Their objective and their momentum is totally different than what ours is in America. And I think it's just important to be able to understand that, we all need to work together towards that, better energy efficient lifestyle for everyone.
Well, let's talk about what you guys are working on. And I mentioned that, the website, swanenergyinc.com/invest, which gives a little bit more information and a video and et cetera. But let's talk a little bit about, easing the calms. If somebody wants to talk to you guys about investments and everything, just what's been going on this week in the war room?
It's top secret. Top secret. We have a lot going on, but it's top secret. Now, anyone that's interested can go to our website, swanenergyinc.com, and contact us, and we can talk about what we have working on if someone qualifies. But in general, we actually have several things cooking, but nothing we want to talk about.
That's really funny. I think one of the big things there is just we've got a lot of strategies going on right now. We're really planning on 2021. You brought up some good points around how the nation's moving forward. I think there's different people that are thinking different things with respect to the president-elect, who it is, what it is. I think there's a 1 million man march or something like that going on in Washington right now. I think there's a lot of different things that are going on. As you pointed out earlier, all these different companies right now, I think you mentioned Marathon, you mentioned Energy Transfer. They're all working on strategies, figuring out which ways to go depending on what legislations would be implemented as time moves forward. And I think we're doing the exact same things right now. So we're trying to keep it under wraps, but we hope to be able to share more with you in the coming months. And obviously, everyone is always available to reach out to us and call us or take a look at our website at swanenergyinc.com. A lot of information presented there, but you can always get us on the phone or on the web.